The data mining firm Palantir faces backlash over its partnership with ICE. The government agency paid the company $800 million last year. Palantir's services include digital profiling tools, which are reportedly being used to investigate undocumented immigrants and compile evidence against them. Some employees say that those tools are violating the civil liberties of immigrants. Douglas MacMillan has been covering the story extensively. He's a corporate accountability reporter for The Washington Post. Douglas, thank you so much for being here with us. Can you tell us more about how Palantir's products are now being used by ICE?
Sure, yeah. Palantir's core technology is all about bringing together disparate sources of data and making it in an easy-to-use dashboard for people in law enforcement and other agencies to quickly find suspects or find patterns in that data. In the case of immigration customs enforcement, ICE agents are now kind of using Palantir's data to profile millions of undocumented immigrants. And while we don't know specifically what role Palantir's tools are being used in things like immigration raids, there is growing evidence that Palantir's software is helping these ICE agents in going about their business in apprehending, arresting, deporting undocumented immigrants, and potentially in some incidents where they've separated families of migrant children.
And we know a portion of Palantir's work involves national security. In fact, it was actually founded using seed money from a CIA business incubator. So why now are employees so upset about its work with ICE?
Sure. Yeah, this is a company. It's 14 years old, and they have a long history of working with the government. They have long-standing contracts with the FBI, CIA. Their growing presence with the Department of Defense, that represents a big business for them. But I think what we're seeing with ICE is there is a portion of their workforce, and they're a company that's based in Silicon Valley, that is concerned about President Trump's immigration agenda and increasingly controversial raids of undocumented immigrants. And I think that we're starting to see a conscience in this company and growing concern among some employees that what they're doing is wrong and that they're providing software and tools to help the president and to help ICE carry out its agenda.
Palantir CEO Alex Karp slammed Google for ending a contract with the Pentagon, saying that tech companies shouldn't be making those decisions and that pulling out of the contract was actually treasonous. How does he justify his company's work with agencies like ICE?
Yeah, well, he's trying to he sees a business opportunity here, and he's trying to position Palantir as one of the few Silicon Valley companies that is super loyal to Washington and loyal to even the most controversial work that the government is doing right now. And I think what you saw in this example that we highlighted in our story in the Washington Post about Google was pulling out of this controversial contract with the Department of Defense. Palantir saw an opportunity to pounce on that and to use that as an example of how this company is not going to proceed with its contracts in Washington. When work with the government becomes controversial among its employees or unpopular among its employees, I think the CEO, Alex Karp, wants to send the message that Palantir is not going to let that impact its decision on who it does business with.
And speaking of who they're doing business with, Palantir's contracts with the government really rose sharply in 2018. There was an $800 million Army contract. But we know that corporate America has been intertwined with politics really for decades. But what makes this partnership with the military different?
Yeah, this is a big breakthrough contract for them. It's the first significant contract of record that includes a line of funding from Congress, and it's also potentially going to be a beachhead for them in winning more large contracts with the Department of Defense. So I think what we're seeing with the company's staunch defense of its controversial ICE contracts is trying to send a signal to Washington that we want to do more work like this, and we deserve to win the biggest contracts, including the ones ahead with the Department of Defense.
And there's just been this sharp increase of companies taking a political stand. There's been political activism shown recently in Silicon Valley especially. So what would you say is the cause for this?
There's a number of causes. I think that there's a lot of folks in Silicon Valley that are waking up to the idea that they can have a voice in how their products are used, especially as we're starting to see technology being used in the world, many ways that Google and Facebook and Amazon and these large tech companies didn't envision it being used. I think a lot of the workers, the rank and file employees at these companies, are starting to see that they have a responsibility for how those products are used, and they are not going to let the CEOs and the management of these companies try to police that, because they see that those managers are more interested in some cases in the business of selling that technology. So we saw a successful Google protest by Google employees on the Pentagon contract a year ago, and we've seen a number of attempts by employees at Salesforce, Amazon, Microsoft that have been less successful so far, but nonetheless show that there is kind of an awakening of this conscience in Silicon Valley.
All right, great reporting, Douglas MacMillan. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.